And at this point, I'd like to ask you all to join your hands and welcome Mr. Pattrick Mullin.
Good afternoon. It's a pleasure to be here. My name, as he said, Pattrick Mullin. I am the Permit Sonoma Ombudsman. One of the main questions, or the most asked question I get is, what is an ombudsman? And ombudsman is a Swedish term that roughly translates as an insufferable know-it-all. One of the reasons I was able to get this job is you do need to know something about everything in the department, and if you don't, you need to know who to get the answer from. So I work at Permit Sonoma, which previously was known as PRMD. We changed the name 2 years ago to kind of have a kinder and friendlier title for the department. Building departments, I think, permitting departments everywhere they don't have the best reputation, shall we say. They're difficult places to navigate if you don't know the systems. There's so many rules and regulations that having the position of ombudsman was seen early on as necessary, but there wasn't funding until about 6 years ago. And the board finally came around and started this position. It was extensive interviews. I ended up with the job and basically was told to create the position, make it happen. I went online, I looked up ombudsman. There's an International Ombudsman Association. And basically there's 5 principles you work under. First is the ombuds position is an informal position. I don't approve or not approve. I have influence in the department, but I can't say yes or no and approve a permit. Along with being informal, I'm neutral. I'm not an advocate for the department, and I'm not an advocate for the person, our clients and customers. I'm an advocate for the process. So if the codes or the ordinances allow something, let's find a way to make it happen. Regulators often look for any and every reason to say no. I don't know why, but that's what you're trained. You're trained to look at all the boxes, look at everything, all the codes, and if you find something wrong, you can say no. But in this world, nothing's perfect. So there's so many rules and regulations. Let's find a way to say yes, and that's been my motto. If it can happen, let's make it happen. My role is also confidential. I don't, if people can come to me that have code violations, they've built things without permits, I don't turn them in. If they're having a problem with other folks in the department, I can iron those problems out without, giving away their identity so much. And I'm a busy guy. Unfortunately, it's a one-person division, shall we speak, and there's always something going on every day. There's a list of, can you help me with this? Can you help me with that? And I very much enjoy it because most of the time I'm able to work with people who are very appreciative of getting their problem solved. Now and then you get the few that are problematic, and that kind of hurts a little, but I'm learning to not take things too personal. So at the department, so PRMD, Permit Sonoma, is the county permitting department. Now, our jurisdiction covers all of the unincorporated areas of Sonoma County. So if you live in Petaluma, you would not come to our department. You'd go to the Petaluma Community Development, I believe it's called. So it's a very large area. The main permits, the most permits we issue are building permits. We did about 8,000 building permits last year. So building permits are pretty straightforward. They're what we call ministerial. You come in, you apply for your house, and you meet the codes, you get a plan check, you reviewed, you meet the codes, okay, here's your permit, you gotta pay your fees, but here's your permit. Another type of permit we have are the zoning permits or the planning permits. Those permits are what we call discretionary. What they do is they give you permission to build something. So if you wanted, say, a winery, you would need to get first a planning permit, a use permit. In that permit, it would spell out the road improvements that are needed, the design, the colors, how many events you can have. There'd be a long, what the water system you need to have, the type of septic system you need to have. That gets all spelled out in your zoning permit, but it doesn't give you a permit to build those things. So it gives you permission to build, and then you have to get your building permit or your grading and your septic and your road encroachment permits to actually do the work. Those permits, those planning permits are discretionary. There's people looking at it. There's often a hearing that goes on, a public hearing where people comment. Planning commissioners look at the proposal and they have input to them. Those are one of the harder permits to get just because of the amount of time. It typically takes a year for a planning permit to go through. We also do well and septic permits. The septic permit, septic drives all the development in the unincorporated county. Most of Sonoma County, the unincorporated portions are on septic systems. If you are planning on building a home or some commercial development, the first thing you need to do, make sure that the zoning allows that, but then get on your septic. Septic takes a long time. Typically, there's a winter factor that needs to be addressed. You need to test for groundwaters. If groundwater is too high, you have to put in special kinds of septic systems. If it's really too high, you can't develop at all. Well permits are another factor. I know west of here is a water scarce area. So well permits can take a long time because you need dry weather well testing to make sure there's enough water. If you're in the water scarce areas, you need to demonstrate you have enough water to support your development. So piecing all these things together, the zoning permits, the well permits, the grading, then the building, it's a complicated process. And that's where the Ombudsman gets called on because people get frustrated or lost, or one side's telling them to do one thing, another division's telling them to do something else, and they need someone to coordinate those projects. Over the last year and a half, we've been dealing with a lot of disaster. The Sonoma Complex fire really put a hurt on Sonoma County, and in the recovery process, the first place folks went is to the building department. We really worked hard at streamlining the process. A lot of the minor clearances that one would need to get for a building permit, we got rid of them for any rebuild projects. We basically considered you're on a septic system, you didn't choose to have your house burned down, we're not going to make you upgrade your septic system because you're building a new home. Typically, if you're going to build a new home where your old home was, you'd need a new system for your new house. In the fires, it's like, no, they can use their old system. No, they don't need those folks don't need a driveway permit to encroach onto the road. They already had that entitlement granted to them. So let's make this as easy as possible. Landscaping was another big one. You know, the planners, and rightfully so, you know, they want to make sure when things are done, they're done well. And landscaping is often an issue, especially they want water, low water usage, landscaping and whatnot. And it's like, we're not going to ask for landscape plans. We want, the last thing these folks who are rebuilding their homes needed was to have to go out and get a landscape architect and pay those extra monies for that. So we really streamlined the process, cut the fees by 40%, and hired an outside agency to do the permitting. So we could keep the business as usual going in our department, and then in the commercial trailers that are outside our department, we have a whole, an outside group that is doing strictly fire rebuilds. Currently, there's been 800 homes that permits have been issued for. There was approximately 2,000 homes in unincorporated Sonoma County that burned. So 800 out of 2,000 doesn't sound like a whole lot, but the average rebuild after wildfires in the United States has been 25% of the homes get rebuilt within 5 years. So we're a year and a half into it, and we're about 40% of the homes having been rebuilt. And I think it's outstanding. I know Sonoma County is different than many other areas that experience wildfire because they're out, say, in Tuolumne County or, you know, Shasta County, things like that, where it's not the Bay Area, and we really are the Bay Area. So the Resiliency Center, the Resiliency Permit Center, which is handling all these, they're doing a great job, and they get these permits turned around. If you have everything, you'll get your permit in a week. And they encourage everybody who's applying, come in, meet with us first, and we'll let you know what you need before you apply. Tennis Wick, that was his brainchild, and it's working wonderful, I think. And last week we had the floods. It's like we're already somewhat compromised with the amount of work that's coming through the building, and now it's really unfortunate. But the flood come along, and that's pulled a lot of our workforce into looking at the flood damaged buildings, us doing a rapid evaluation, safety assessment on them, they put a tag on the building, red, a yellow, or a green. Green means the building's fine, you can occupy it. Yellow means caution, you can't live there, but you can go in and out. And red means you can't go in, you got to get it fixed. And so we've looked at a couple of thousand buildings after this flood, and fortunately very few have been red tagged. The county has a program for elevating houses in flood areas. They use FEMA monies. FEMA grants the local Community Development Commission monies. Like they get buckets of money every 3 or 4 years, and then they use those monies to help people elevate. You have to have experienced flood damage in the past to qualify for these monies, but several hundred homes have been elevated out on the river, and that had really helped the amount of red tags that we experienced. they've gone down. They're about a quarter of what they were 20 years ago after a flood. I'm trying to address some of the issues that were sent to me, so I'm going to move on. There was questions about well and septic. One of the things that's going on with septic is we've rewritten our, what they call the OTS manual, an on-site wastewater treatment system. It is a mouthful for saying septic system. And that manual has been modified, and one of the biggest things is it's loosened up the amount of work that you can do before you have to improve your septic system increased quite a bit in this new version. It makes a lot of people happy that they can do more work. You can almost rebuild your house as long as you don't add bedrooms without having to improve your septic system, which it's a big deal. And we're waiting for the board to address that, to approve it, and it keeps getting postponed, and it just got postponed again based on the floods. One of the questions I was asked was about the metering of residential water wells. And a couple of years ago, when the drought was a much bigger topic, groundwater management, Sacramento was really looking hard at groundwater management and wanted jurisdictions to come up with a plan on how they're going to conserve their groundwater. So Sonoma County put together a group, the cities, the Sonoma County Water Agency, county officials. There's quite a few people that are part of this groundwater sustainability committee, and one of the things they will not be doing is monitoring residential wells. It's not going to happen. There isn't the money for it, and there isn't the turnaround. Agriculture uses approximately 85% of the water, the groundwater. Residential and commercial get the other 15%. There's just not enough money to monitor. There's not enough reason nor money to monitor residential wells. So that won't be happening at all. Housing is a huge issue in Sonoma County right now. A permitting department, we have a certain amount of influence over housing, but housing startups are really, that's based on private development. Who's gonna come in and get permits for housing? We have been working on housing and trying to loosen up some of the regulations for adding a second dwelling unit to your house, being able to convert a bedroom in the house to a rentable second dwelling unit with a little kitchenette in it. One that's separate from the house is called an accessory dwelling unit. And they can be up to 1,200 square feet. That was recently increased from 1,000 square feet in an attempt to create more housing. And then the Board of Supervisors waived the park and traffic fees for a second dwelling unit that is less than 750 square feet, and they cut the park and traffic fees in half for anything less than 1,000 square feet down to 750. So the park and traffic fees are about $8,000 for a second dwelling unit. If you're 1,000 square feet or less, it's closer to 4,000, and if you're 750 square feet less, there's no park or traffic fees. And those kind of fees get in people's way of creating, building a little unit in the back, and so we're hoping that helps. People asked about the length of time to get permits. And why does it take so long? Most of the time, the package, your proposal is sitting on a shelf waiting for someone to get to it. We've been really working hard on cutting times down. And then we got hit really hard after the fires because Santa Rosa set up a resiliency permit center and the county set up a resiliency permit center, and people left our department to go work for those departments. And we lost half of our plan checkers that way. We're back up to speed, plan times are going down, and on our website we have what is called a performance data tab. And you can go in and look at, you can find the wait times for the different permits that you're applying for. And I think it's a great idea. It puts our laundry out there for everyone to see how long it's taking. And we are getting it down to about 6 weeks now before, say, a house would get looked at, which is pretty good, I think. I have a question about permit approval of legacy farm or ranch buildings. I know, especially the rural Petaluma, there's a lot of buildings that never got a permit. Many of them were built before there was a building department. The building department did not come into existence until 1962. So anything built before 1962 did not need a permit because there was no agency issuing permits. If someone has a barn or an accessory structure on their property that is old, you don't have to do anything. If you want it recognized, you can come into our department and get a legal non-conforming declaration for it. Legal non-conforming basically means it's grandfathered in. The county assessor's office, which is right across the street, has field notes. They go out to all properties on a pretty regular basis and look at what buildings are on the property, and they write that down in their field notes. So if you can show, based on the assessor field notes, hey, this building here was built before 1962, it's an over-the-counter determination that you get a legal non-conforming status. Somebody recently had purchased some property down just south of here where the old drive-in theater used to be. There was a building on the property that they made wine in for years and years and years. He was able to get a legal non-conforming determination that it was a building that they made wine in. It didn't give him a use permit to do new wine because the winemaking had stopped for quite a few years. So he still needs the use permit, but he doesn't need a building permit to upgrade that building because it had been used for making wine for so long. It still has that same occupancy. Let's see, the housing issue in Sonoma County, going back to that, one of the hardest things with housing is the need for infrastructure. We're not going to solve our housing problem with septic systems. Septic systems aren't designed for large quantities of homes, subdivisions, multi-family, multi-story residential structures can't be served by septic systems. So, I would encourage you, if you get the opportunity to talk to your politicians, ask them about when are the government going to start focusing on sewer systems? We need new sewer treatment plants in order to increase the housing. With increased housing, it's got to be a more density in the cities. I think one of the most beautiful things about Sonoma County is our community separators, is the country feel that you can see right out there. It doesn't mean no new housing tracts should go in, but we need to be careful to not lose the quality of life that we have here. So building an infrastructure that's going to support more dense urban areas is what is going to be needed. I'm getting a little editorial here. It's what's going to be needed in order to have more homes. I think the SMART train is a good idea. I would love to see it expanded more and more and more, and then development around SMART train tracks so people can get from point A to point B without getting on the roads. But without roads, without schools, without hospitals, without sewer treatment plants, I don't see how we can just put a ton of housing in. People are talking 30,000 new homes are needed. Oh, that's bigger than Roanoke Park. Well, where are they going to go? Adding second dwelling units is helpful, but what's happening throughout the county is roads like Western or Spring Hill or Bodega Avenue, Liberty Road, these all become commuter roads now. And they're just little 2-lane country roads, and it's problematic. So push those government officials, hey, build some sewage treatment plants. Let's get some infrastructure in the cities so we can increase housing at a rate that we can't do in the unincorporated areas. And I'm going to open it up to questions.
What's for someone that has a outbuilding built after 1962 or 64, whatever that is?
Built before 62?
And it wasn't permitted at that time, but now we want to make it right. What's the path forward?
There's a structure that was built without a permit after 1962. How do you make it right? One of the first things would be to come in and talk to me if you're in the county. And I'm right in the lobby, my door's open. What you would do is get plans and apply for a building permit, and we would treat that building as if you were building it today. It would have to meet today's codes. I hear the state of California is looking to change that regulation. If you can show you built it in the 60s, then you build it to 60s codes. But that's not approved yet, but I think it might be coming.
Patrick, thank you first of all. You're talking about groundwater sustainability. You mentioned that you don't expect well monitoring to occur for residential aspects. What about commercial and agricultural?
So currently, if you get a use permit to do some commercial, or my favorite topic, cannabis, then you do have to monitor your groundwater.
What about existing?
What
about existing businesses?
You
don't have the personnel, but the goal is to monitor.
Currently, no. It's not going to apply to anything existing. It's only new proposed.
And is there any chance of Governor Newsom rolling back or any of the things that Governor Brown began?
Well, there is a chance, and I'll tell you what I've seen in the office. When we were experiencing drought, say 3 years ago, it was a hot topic. What's going on with the groundwater? And they passed some regulations, and so the groundwater sustainability plans were mandated for jurisdictions all over in areas that were identified as potentially problematic. Now that we had a major winter 2 winters ago, and it was dry again last year, so it was like, oh, maybe that was just an anomaly. Now this year, it's just not as hot of a topic right now. There's a lot of water.
Thank you.
I'm going to go here and then there. Yes. You.
So, if your house is built before 1962 and you want to renovate a bathroom, do you need a permit?
Yes.
Why?
So renovate the bathroom. What you would need is, there's two things. You would need one person's renovation is another person's, oh yeah, we're knocking down all these walls and doing this.
It's exactly the way.
If you're not touching the plumbing and you're not touching the electrical, you do not need a permit.
Oh,
If you're changing plumbing, if you're taking the old bathtub out,
right,
the old sink out, those type of things, you would need a plumbing permit.
right.
If you're changing electrical, you would need an electrical permit. They're issued over the counter. It's the same day, you don't need plans.
So when you said prior to 1962, what is it?
The piece that's prior to 1962 is buildings that were built prior to that in the county areas have no permits.
When you're talking about outbuildings,
No, the homes had no permits. Many septic systems were done without permits. If I didn't need a permit to build a house, who's gonna check on my septic? So builders just built, in many, many areas. I think Santa Rosa was sometime mid-50s when they started there. I don't know about Petaluma. So anytime you're doing new work, then that has to comply with today's codes. Yeah. And so, like a bathroom renovation like what you're talking about, if you came in, you were gonna change the plugs and move your toilet, et cetera, that would be somewhere around $200. And it's over the counter. Yes?
And I talked about this before, and you said you touched on it, talk to us about cannabis in the county, and what issues are coming up that are affecting your and the county's life.
Well, first I would put out, if you're looking for a speaker, there is a cannabis ombudsman for the county of Sonoma. And I am so glad that I don't have all the cannabis problems that come in. There's quite a bit of activity around cannabis in the county, and the hoops you have to jump through to get a use permit to grow cannabis or to process cannabis is substantial, and it's made it difficult for a lot of people to get permits. I don't think there's been more than 4 or 5 cannabis use permits that have been approved yet. I mean, that's how many have been approved, and there's quite a few that haven't. The regulations around cannabis has made it difficult if you are a grower and you sell out of state. If you become legal, you can no longer sell out of state. And so that's really compromised a lot of people, or what it's done is we're not going to get a permit. The biggest problems we're seeing around cannabis are the impact it has on neighborhoods, neighbors, areas. There's too much crime associated with it. There's too many large fences. If somebody wants to use pot, I don't care. But I think the county, I'm editorializing again, I think we jumped the gun. They were looking at the amount of revenue they would get from taxes, and it's not really materializing across the state. Not as many people came in for permits, basically because they would be killing themselves. They'd be shutting off their buyers if they did. And it tears me up when people come in and they're so upset because the person next door to them is growing, and the quality of life that they were experiencing out on Valley Ford Road or something like that is gone. And this whole other operation. The Board of Supervisors is really looking at changing some of what they put out there. And doing it in warehouses, in industrial areas, I think that's what the board's looking more at now, and I think that's more appropriate than, go ahead, plant an acre of pot. off of Old Adobe Road, and you know, and your neighbors can deal with that. So have the cannabis ombudsman talk to you. He'd be a good speaker. Yes.
Oh, I'm just wondering, so is the county, when it comes to permitting for cannabis, is it still only in the unincorporated areas and then cities are still in charge of permitting? Or is cannabis a different deal where the county is in charge of all cannabis permits?
No, the cities have jurisdiction over anything within the city limits. Yes.
I was involved in the flood of 86 in Petaluma, and when we were doing, we had FEMA insurance, but one of the things that happened that I thought was very helpful was that we did not have, all those houses down there in the Karen area were built like in the 50s, 60s, and 50s and 60s. We did not have three-prong plugs. And so we had all of these, with the safety. And so what we did was the county and the city worked together and they waived that so that we could do the reconstruction and fix the houses up, and we didn't have to do new electrical. Do you see anything like that ever happening today?
Yes, yes, but I don't know if that would be waived now because of what's tough is that your electric panel doesn't have a neutral and a ground bar, and so you're just running them all together anyways. So, but I do see we're looking at the accessibility issues, the ADA type issues on businesses that have flooded out. Mandating that they put in ADA bathrooms, and so we're looking at an exception for repairs. This is a repair, this isn't a voluntary thing, and so in that way we are waiving some of the regs.
Yeah, I'd like to ask the final question, that is, you talked about some of your staff goes to the city, which I mentioned is an economic issue where salary. I'm just kind of curious when we hear about pensions and budget issues, and so how is it accountable? I mean, I would imagine that they have enough people to do the work to keep the work going quickly. Do you find that you have staff issues, or how does that work?
Well,
Easy question.
yeah, it's a very easy question. Yes. I think that one of the bigger problems that the Board of Supervisors is looking at is the amount of money, the amount of cost for retirees. So they have to keep that money going out. And so what they're doing is restricting the amount of new hirings so that problem doesn't just keep, the can doesn't keep getting kicked down the road. The permit department, we are a fee-based department. We don't take the money out of the general fund. It's a fee for service. So our building permits, our zoning permits, pay the salaries of the folks that work there.
So you will have to work into your 80s then probably, will you?
Right, but that still doesn't, there's still county liability for the retiree portion. So it's a struggle. It's like we need the help to get the job done, and the county's looking at their unfunded liability issue. I don't know what the answer is.
Well, it's
tough.
good that we've got people like you there, Patrick, so thank you for coming and for everything. And
Thank you for
just give a big round of applause. And I have a speaker for the speaker. Here's a Bluetooth speaker here for you. I'd like you to have that. And so when things get going tough, just put some classical music on, and I'm sure that you'll soothe everybody down. And so thank you for being a presenter today.
Thank you very much.
Okay, have a good one. Thank you. Okay, well, I guess that takes care of it today. Remember, if you have time, Friday afternoon or the weekend, drop on by the Salvation Army. You want to do a little bit of painting, and at 1:15 now, excuse me, I'll get to you in a second, Randy. At 1:15, we're going to be right here at this table for those who are interested into men and women issues, family safety, and diversity. And Randy, you had a question?
What's the address of the Salvation Army?
I think it's like 805 McDowell South. If you were going to go across on Caulfield, which is usually the easy way to cross town, go on Caulfield, And when you get to McDowell, it's just about half a block north. So it's a big building. Okay, with that, I'm going to call the meeting adjourned. I hope you have a good weekend. Stay dry. I'll see you next week.